Much like Hong Kong, Taiwan has long been hanging on to their independence from China, but now that China has gained a lot of control in Hong Kong, they're focusing more of their attention on Taiwan. Taiwan is very aware of this, so recently they've made a couple of very interesting steps. Among those steps is buying a lot of newly upgraded F-16 fighter jets from the US Army, and they're committing to more trade deals with the US in general, thereby strengthening their relationship with the US as well. At the same time, they're also introducing a new passport that will further set them apart from China. So all of this is obviously upsetting China a lot. They're seeing the US as a foreign power who comes in to influence these smaller nation states right in the backyard of China. And in a way, you can say that they're right. So right now, there's a lot of things going on between China, the US, and Taiwan. And in today's video, we will take a look at what exactly is going on and what consequence it will have in the next coming months. Stay with me, we begin right after the intro. All right. So over the last few years, President Trump really has begun to make life difficult for China. Among a whole list of things, maybe the worst one for China is how he has begun to make military defense alliances with nation states in and around the South China Sea. Recently, he formed new military pacts with nations like Australia and India, essentially allowing the US Navy to come in and occupy the military outposts that those nations have within the South China Sea, legalizing the presence of the US Navy within the very backyard of China. And even though Taiwan has long been an ally of the US, this move really caught my attention. Take a look at this. The US finalizes sale of 66 F-16 fighters to Taiwan as China tensions escalate. Also, I just want to say that this guy is really red in the face. I mean, either I need some sun or he needs to calm down. Okay, let's read on. Taiwan will receive 66 new American-made F-16 fighter jets in the biggest arms sale to the self-governing island in years. The deal finalized on Friday comes as China has been increasing pressure on the island, which Beijing considers to be an inseparable part of its territory. Alright, so the reason that this really provokes China is that China sees these smaller nations like Taiwan and Hong Kong as rightfully belonging to them. And they do have a shared complicated history, so you can kind of see why they would think that way. But having said that, these are independent, sovereign nations that they do rely on China for some things, but they have their own governing systems, just like Hong Kong, at least until recently had. Taiwan has its own governing system, it's its own nation, but it's called a Republic of China, so they have a complicated history. So since China recently has been very successful in implementing the new national security law in Hong Kong, Taiwan is looking at that and they're seeing that they probably are up next. Now that China gained control in Hong Kong, they are probably going to begin to enact more control and try to gain more influence in Taiwan as well. So this move to buy up 66 fighter jets, which is like a huge deal. It's a massive military deal. It's a strong move for Taiwan to indicate that they're going to keep their sovereignty. They're not going to bow to the Chinese CCP government. In that same way, they just announced that they will be rolling out a new passport where they completely remove the English part of the passport that says Republic of China. It will now only say, in English at least, Taiwan on the passport, making a statement to the rest of the world, who mostly will understand English, that this is Taiwan, this is not a Republic of China. So, Taiwan unveils new look passports to avoid China confusion. Island changes name in English on documents to be introduced next year. Foreign Minister says changes in response to discrimination encountered by Taiwanese abroad. Now, you have the feeling that that's just a diplomatic excuse of trying to distance themselves from China, because with all the buying up of the fighter jets, the different things that are going on right now diplomatically, you have a sense that saying that it's just to discourage discrimination abroad, that's kind of a cop-out. But obviously you need to say it that way, because you can't come right out and say the direct truth. That would be too direct, right? So it says Taiwan has unveiled a new passport design, enlarging the word Taiwan in English on the cover to highlight the island's sovereignty. The formal Republic of China title is also in smaller font in English and in different position. Okay, so I kind of got that wrong. The thing is that it's not visible on the passport, but I'm sure if you look for it on the inside, it will be there. Taiwanese Foreign Minister Joseph Wu said Taiwanese nationals needed to be able to travel abroad without being mistaken for nationals from mainland China, and the changes could help avoid such confusion. So you're kind of beginning to get the bigger picture here. Taiwan is buying up all of these fighter jets to show strong military strength, and at the same time they're removing the Republic of China from at least the surface of their passports, so it's not clearly visible anymore. All in all, it's a strong stance to show that they will keep their sovereignty and independence from mainland China. So for a long time, China's been really clever in the way that they've been gaining influence in the neighboring nations and throughout the rest of the world at the same time. They're spending money to buy up infrastructure, to lend out money to these small nations that can't pay back the money. And when they can't, China effectively owns part of these nations. And at the same time, they're spending a massive amount of money on politicians in different nations, including, by the way, the US. They're one of the biggest contributors to US politicians, which might be the reason why, at least on the Democratic side of US politics, you don't see a lot of US senators or almost anyone call out China. They go more for Russia or some other nation, but not actually China, who influence peddles the most of foreign nations into US politics, but also into these smaller nations surrounding China. So it must be really frustrating if you're China to begin to see these nations stand up to them. This whole new wave of conflicts kind of began when Australia began standing up to China in the influence peddling that China was doing into Australian politics. Australia stood up to it through Scott Morrison, who made some declarations and said they wouldn't any longer take it the same way. China then put a bunch of trade embargoes on Australia, really hurting the Australian economy right when the coronavirus was beginning to take effect into Australia. So it really damaged especially the farmers in Australia. It also set an example that if you stand up to China, there will be economic consequences. So it's better just not to stand up. Just let them have their influence. Just take the money and everything will be fine, at least for now. And maybe in the future you'll suffer a bit, but it won't be too much. That's kind of the philosophy and the way that they influence nations around them. But it's getting a little hard to control when all of these nations are standing up to China at the same time. That's why I wanted to bring in the story about India. So India just decided to ban the 100 most influential apps from China in India. So this is a huge deal. As you might know, India and China are having a lot of tensions right now on the border between the two nations. So this is a strong signal and symbol from India. It might not have huge economic ramifications, but it does put a strong end to the influence that China can have in India, since a lot of the apps that are coming out from China are being accused, at the very least accused, of being used by the Chinese government to spy on these people who are using the apps. India found out, and now they're banning these apps in India, which they're huge apps. So it will have some economic consequence, but it's more of a stand. And counting in all of these other nations doing the same thing at the same time, you're kind of beginning to see why China is feeling pressured when they've been used to for so long that it's been the other way around, that they could pressure all the other smaller nations. So you might wonder, why now? Why are all of these nations standing up to China at the same time? Why not 10 years ago, 5 years ago, when China began its influence into a lot of these nations? Well, I think the reason is that President Trump of the US has been putting a lot of focus and attention on how China is influencing through the economics other nations. Most of these nations that are standing up to China right now took Chinese money little by little years ago, but now they're seeing the control of their own nations give ground little by little. It's incrementally, it's not done overnight, it's not done militarily. So these nations are now waking up to the fact that if they don't take a stance now, they almost won't be in control of their own nations. And that is the case for a lot of especially the smaller nations surrounding China as a whole. And at the same time, they're emboldened by these other countries doing the same thing. Now, I do think that Taiwan would be standing up to China militarily, economically, in their influence peddling, regardless of these other nations. But it must give them some motivation to jump on this wave. And Taiwan, to be fair, has been standing up to the influence peddling of China for a long time. But now that the US is helping, Taiwan is strengthening its ties to the US by buying all of these military fighter jets and at the same time strengthening relations in terms of trade. It's a strong stance, and they must feel like now is the right time to do it. Now is the time where all of the pieces are moving into place and they finally have the chance to take a strong stance. Finally, I want to wrap up with this article from SCMP because I found this really interesting. Hong Kong has been fighting a long fight with China to keep their independence, and recently it looks like China is beginning to win that fight through the national security law and other implementations of Hong Kong law. So now these Hong Kong people are actually making citizenship requests into Taiwan because Taiwan is now offering a path to citizenship for these Hong Kong people who are seeking to avoid the Chinese government taking over too much in their own nation. Obviously, no one wants to see the people of Hong Kong having to leave Hong Kong because of Chinese influence. But if they have to leave, it's interesting to note that countries like the UK has offered a full path to citizenship for the people of Hong Kong as long as they have these infamous BNO passports. These are British nationals overseas. But for those that don't have those, Taiwan is offering a very similar approach to how they can gain citizenship into Taiwan. They can do so by investing what amounts to $200,000 into either companies or buildings, and that will put them on a direct path into citizenship in Taiwan, which obviously is a very close nearby neighbor to Hong Kong. If enough people end up taking this deal and taking the UK deal and actually move away from Hong Kong, I think this whole thing with China taking over control in Hong Kong could really backfire on the Chinese government. So often I speak out against China and their influence campaigns against different nations because I think it's very important to put some focus on. But I want to make it very clear that I'm not talking about the Chinese people. As for all of the Chinese people that I've spoken to are hardworking people with great integrity. They're very polite. They're very decent and very nice as a people. So I never, when I speak about the Chinese government, I never mean the Chinese people. So from looking into this, I really began to like the nation of Taiwan. They're such a small nation, and they've been in such a struggle for a long time to keep their independence and not lose out to China. They don't want to end up in the same way that Hong Kong is ending up right now, and they see themselves culturally and they have a lot of shared history. They see themselves, I think, a lot in the same way. They can draw some parallels, and they don't want to end up like Hong Kong is ending up right now. As with all things, this is a bit tricky because they do have some shared history with China, and China does feel like this is a republic of China. They're giving them their freedoms, they're giving them the rights to live the way they want, to govern themselves. But in the end, it's just a republic of China. which obviously the Taiwanese people see themselves as a sovereign nation, see themselves as having their own culture, their own history also. And so you can kind of see things from both sides. I would never argue for China coming in, taking over that nation. Never. But you can, if you have to look at it from both sides, and I try always to, even though it's hard sometimes, especially when China tries to take over these smaller nation states. I just feel like you can make a case from both sides, but obviously I'm always going to land on the side of Taiwan and the side of Hong Kong, keeping their independence, keeping their freedoms and their sovereignty, and not being influenced or invaded, even if it's a slow process, invaded by the Chinese government. I've been to Taiwan a couple of weeks some years ago, and I really loved the nature. It's such a beautiful place, with the culture and the architecture and the buildings we saw. It's incredible. I really recommend anyone who hasn't gone there and who has a chance to go, just go there. It's an incredible place. It's so beautiful. So we don't want to watch them become another nation, losing their freedoms and sovereignty to China. All right, guys, remember to subscribe to my channel if you like this video. Also, I'm back from summer holidays, so I'll be doing these videos to the extent that I can every single day. Tomorrow's video will be about the migrant flood coming into Europe. Another huge migrant wave is about to hit Europe. And from what I read in the news, it's being completely undercovered. It's not reported by any of the big news stations. So I'm very interested in looking into that, looking into the numbers, and see what that's all about. So check it out tomorrow if you want to. And thank you so much for spending your time on this video. Have a great day and God bless you.